Yeah, sorry, Jack, you're not carrying the balance. I'll be back.
Hello, welcome to the channel. We're working on cutesy little nest today. Now, there's nothing about being late, it's just when you want to join. Yes, can do them from all kinds of sizes, from tiny little ones that are suitable for things such as sugar gliders and baby birds, and then you get bigger and bigger as they go along. These ones are still quite small. This one's going to be quite a mini one. And you have them to the point where it's actually folded over. So the nest is basically a pouch that can then be folded down. And folding down means that the edges have got better strength to them. They're more rigid, especially if you've got something inside that tries to move around, keeps it in place and looks as cute as him. So these ones are most likely going to go to the Ark Guild, and they send things through to different wildlife charities, or different carers, I should say. They are the charity. They provide to the carers. And so I started supporting them back in 2019 when the bushfires were happening here in Australia. Depending if there's anyone here who wasn't aware, the bushfires were quite severe in 2019, and there were a lot of wildlife that were badly damaged from it, as well as a lot of animals were abandoning their young because of not being able to keep looking after them. A lot of bats, strangely enough. And so the first things I actually did was I used to do sewing, and I sewed the bat wraps, which were like this, little round cushions with an extra flap, so that the baby bats were put on and they would cling to the cushion itself. And then you would wrap the extra cloth around them, so it gave them that feeling of coziness, like when they're on their mothers, and the mothers would wrap their wings around them. I actually learned to do a little bit more when it came to sewing during that time, because I learned to sew pouches as well. And so they were roo pouches and wallaby pouches. And so having to do double seams and things like that to be able to make space for the animals at the same time as keeping it safe, where they weren't getting their fingers caught up in any of the threads or the edging. Now I'm just doing myself a little thing to show where the rounds start and finish. I used to have stitch markers. I don't know what I've done with them, but yarn works just as well as a stitch marker as anything else. And so over the last few years, I pretty much spend time either crocheting for Knit One, Give One, and that's one that helps in relation to homeless people, uh, women's refuge, places like that, as well as more rural communities, and then also making things for ARC Guild. So I go between humans and wildlife, really. With regards to the wildlife items, there's a fair few things that can be made for them. These are possibly some of the most basic, is making the little nests, again, depending on what you're used to making as well. And then you have things such as possum palaces and possum pods. And so they're things that can actually be hung up in the trees or on branches, so that then possums or other kind of climbing creatures actually have somewhere that they can put themselves into, cozy up when they're being kept in captivity until they're ready to be released. So here I'm doing some small nests, because if you can see how fine the yarn is, I think this is either a 4-ply or a 6-ply. Don't think it's an 8. So I'm actually going ahead with a 3mm hook, making it nice and tight, because the important thing is, especially for any animals with tiny claws, getting them caught into the yarn is a bit problematic. So giving it something that's a little bit more suited to their needs. Okay, I'll just take this off. It's not really needed. We'll keep single threaded like this. So this one's going to be a nice, cutie little patootie size one. So we'll have it like that. Possibly, I usually make them about 1 and a bit high compared to the actual diameter. Again, as long as it has the strength to hold itself on its own, like these ones, which are much thicker yarn. So, which is why I'm going with quite a thin yarn, but a small hook to give it as much as much density as possible, I suppose. And so here, pretty much once you get this far, you just do back loops to then start creating the walls of the nest. So I've so far held back from going off to Spotlight, which is my #1 place in Australia to go yarn shopping. Depends what time they're still open till, and once I finish my stream, whether or not I still do a cheeky trip over there and see if I can pick up some more things. Actually planning on going there to pick up some wall hangings because I've got a crochet blanket rug kind of thing that I'm going to be putting up on the wall just to help with the echo in this room. And I mean, if I stumble into the yarn aisle and yarn stumbles into my hands and I stumble to the checkout and the yarn is still in my hands, I mean, it would be rude of me not to buy it and bring it home. I mean, as you can see, this is all the yarn I have left. I mean, if you believe that, you'll believe anything, but still, this is all the yarn I have left. I'm just going to tweak this a little bit. There we go. So if we're going for this rather vibranty kind of green at the moment, once I finish this one, what color should we go with next? I did for a while think of making some rugs or something like that for a dog shelter I used to volunteer at, but ended up being, I think they did better off having blankets and towels gifted to them or donated to them that were better than having a crocheted item. They go through a lot of stuff there too. And because some dogs stress rip stuff up, you've got more chance of them ending up ingesting some yarn, which maybe not the best thing for them. And 90% of the yarn I use is acrylic. Couple of reasons. I mean, one, it's cheaper to be able to get in bulk to be able to then do a lot of crocheting. And two, more importantly, acrylic pretty much can just be thrown into the washing machine if it needs cleaning. And so if you've got one of these which gets used for about 2 days, needs to go through the wash, needs to go through the dryer, back out, keep going, use it again. You need something that's going to withstand washing machines and regular washing. Acrylic can do that. Cotton and merino and things like that, they're expensive and often need, hand washing, can't be tumble dried, things like that. So I prefer to work with something more durable because the quality is not as important as the durability. There we go. At the moment, it looks like a really weird saucer, but we're working on it. We're working on it. Now, I know it's a little quiet on the recording. I don't usually have any relaxing music playing in the background when I crochet. Usually have either a little bit louder rock music, bit of metal, and also listening to audiobooks or podcasts or things like that. Because it depends on what you're up to, what you feel like you need to spend your mental energy on whilst your hands are busy. I've had a few times where I'd be listening to an audiobook by Terry Pratchett, always a good giggle. And like you can spend a few hours at a time crocheting whilst listening to something. So I'm spending my time with you, but I do actually have an earpod in and listening to a D&D show. There's nothing quite like listening to half a dozen people being ridiculous whilst keeping your hands busy and doing it for good reason as well. I've just about got a big batch of items ready to go to the Ark Guild. I might be able to either send it off in a couple of weeks, or depending on where they are, I might even be able to go and drop it off to them. Having said that, if they've got some carers in the area that need these items, I can pop them in there too. Depends on their preference. With Net One Give One, that's the charity in Victoria, Australia. Everything goes to their address over there. Now, there is the option of having drop-off points, which they're mostly around Victoria, and a few of them around New South Wales, where I am. But you also have the option of dropping them off at particular stores, such as Lincraft. Now, I don't have a particular local Lincraft, and I prefer just sending all of my items in one big box at any one time. I do have a half-made blanket for Knit One Give One. I really need to take the time to finish sewing it together. So the hardest thing sometimes is actually doing the sewing. Sewing in ends, at least on something like this, nice and simple. But oh my goodness, when you have 28 squares, crocheted or knitted, and you have to sew in every single thread, and then you have to sew it together or crochet it together, makes it a little easier. It is boring. It is boring. I do not know anyone who enjoys weaving in loose ends. Now, Knit One Give One do actually accept squares, knitted or crocheted squares, and then their team in Victoria and Melbourne would actually do the sewing together. But to be honest, I know how annoying it is, and I don't think I need someone to do it for me. If I do 28 squares, I can sew them together for them. I'm kind of umming and ahhing as to what next to do on a video. We have spoken about doing a toy octopus, and that's still very much on the books. The other thing I think I may do as well is, I haven't done it in a while, and maybe make a couple of toddler sweaters. But I want to make sure that even though I'm doing it in acrylic, I want it to be a softer acrylic than what I've got that I use for scarves and beanies and things like that, because children and toddler skin can be a little bit more delicate. And so having this stuff is lovely and soft, but having something more rugged like this, not as nice against the skin for a child, for a baby. That actually means that if I don't have soft enough acrylic, I'm going to have to go shopping. Now that's got me wondering, what time does Spotlight close today? Yeah. One moment, let's have a hunt and have a look, just in case. I'm surprised my phone hasn't been listening to me and telling me what times things open and close. Close at 5 p.m. Oh no. It's 3:35 here in Sydney, Australia. I don't plan on being on here for less than at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. So I won't have time today. Just means I'll have to make time during the week. It'd be interesting to do a mixture between the human and animal side of things. I should make a couple of little nests like this. May make a couple of chicks to go in them. Oh, I could just make a few little farm animals, including a few chickens and chicks in baskets. Nests, baskets. Of course, they're nests. And so what are you up to whilst you're watching this? I hope craft work in the hands at the moment. I find that when I have to focus on something like this, where I can't take my eyes away from it, is where I definitely need to be listening to something as opposed to watching. However, the blanket that I'm making at the moment, which is currently living on the couch, half made, I can watch shows in either English or foreign languages and find that I'm able to focus on both quite comfortably. Especially needing to take the time with a foreign language movie or show to actually read the subtitles. I've been crocheting I started learning to crochet when I was a child. My grandmother, as every grandmother should, taught me to crochet and to knit. And I must admit, crochet was always my preference. But taught me, unfortunately, to do granny squares first. And the problem with being like a 7 or 8-year-old trying to learn granny squares is that if you don't know how to gauge right, your squares look a mess. And whether you're trying to do squares or circles or goodness knows what, it is messy. And so whatever I made did not look good. And then about maybe 18, 20 years ago, a couple of years after I moved to Australia, had serious glandular fever, which made me very unwell, if anyone's had that. And whilst recovering from it, I thought I needed something to keep myself busy, because if not, I was going to lose my mind. I couldn't work, couldn't go out. So got myself a hook, got myself some yarn, got myself a hold of YouTube, and pretty much relearned again to crochet. And at that point, I was learning things such as just straight lines, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And when you're learning how to do gauge, that's the best way of doing it. You're just going back and forth the same stitch. And after a time, once you get your stitches to be uniform, then you can make things like this, because then you've got clean looking stitches. And you try to do a circle, which actually looks like a circle, which helps a lot. So a good way of knowing where you're up to with the nests is you have a look at the walls that you create for them and you fold them in. And if when you fold them in, you haven't made it to the other edge, still not long enough, still not tall enough. So I want it to be at least as long as the diameter of the base, plus a little bit more. So what do you think would be a good color for maybe a baby or toddler sweater without taking into account if it's a boy or a girl? Because it's very much a case, I want to make sure that what I have is, it doesn't matter about gender, more importantly about the comfort of the child. Oh, having mentioned that, I do need to see about getting some Indigenous colours. This is the Australian Indigenous, the Aboriginals. Sometimes they do the Indigenous colours for the more rural communities, dealing like in the Northern Territory and places like that, to provide them with knitted and crocheted items. And now I don't usually myself focus on those ones just because I find it hard to do 3 color items. I'm very much a 1 color kind of person, or, 2. I find doing multicolors sometimes is a little bit difficult because it doesn't look quite as clean when I do it. I really just need to learn a bit better. But if I can do multicolors in relation to scarves, beanies, and gloves, would be a nice thing to be able to work out. And so even though this is a small item, because of how small the stitches are, is to make sure that baby claws and talons don't have issues with them. It does take a little bit longer than expected to make, but it also means it's cute as hell. I do wonder what kind of animals end up in the nest that I make. Hopefully the bigger ones may have like baby kookaburras in them. That'd be cool. These littlies would be nice if it's like a pair of sugar gliders sleeping in them. The bats aren't put in these, like I mentioned before. They get the bat wraps. And then they get put into little incubators. Now, depending on other countries' idea of bats, the thing to bear in mind here is that you do have some really lovely ones like the fruit bats around New South Wales. And after the really bad fires over 2019, 2019 and 2020 found a massive reduction when it came to the bat population, because when there wasn't food available, the parents, the mothers would abandon the young because, survival. And that's why so many baby bats were gathered up and ended up in care. things with the wildlife items. It's not so much of a problem with me having a dog in the house, because a little bit of dog hair on these isn't going to be the end of the world. But these little creatures that end up going to Knit One Give One and going to homes and hopefully not to homeless people, because it's not nice having children who are homeless, but going to shelters and things like that, whatever the children need, you want to make sure they're not covered in dog hair. So once these are made, they get put away from a dog, because I've got a big dog and she's a big shedder. And my friends know she is a giant 40-kilo lap dog that has absolutely no concept of personal space, which is absolutely wonderful unless you're trying to keep dog hair off stuff. Unfortunately, she's a short-haired dog, a bull Arab cross Irish wolfhound. So her fur is not long enough for me to spin into yarn and make dog hair items. She just sheds everywhere and makes a mess of the floor, or the couch, or me, or my partner. With a sneaky stitch that won't stay in place. Nothing quite like personification of a stitch to be annoyed about. I'll have to see over the next few evenings. So I mean, it's nearly 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon here. But I might see in the next few evenings whether or not I jump back on as well and do some more crocheting. I think possibly the next thing I'll make will be the little a little octopus. Oh, I've got one of those I can show you actually. There you go. Cutesy little boy. Cute little girl. That's the octopus. So I might see about doing one of those later on. I'll see what colour. I've got a beautiful rainbow coloured yarn, which of course, these are the only yarns I've got left. However, other than that, got a lovely rainbow coloured yarn here. Nice and bright. I think that would be pretty cool. I may also see about taking a bit of time of doing some cross stitching on this channel too. Continue with a dingo that I'm working on. A couple of really nice Australian patterns that I found. So I'm working on a dingo now. There are two others in the same gallery collection. One which is a wombat, which is quite cute, but one of them which actually is it's not a possum, but it is one of those kinds of animals. Gorgeous little thing hanging out on a branch. I also do some of the cross stitching on a new channel that I've created, which is Relaxing Cross Stitch, as in Relaxing X Stitch. So if you're interested in having a look at a little bit of cross stitching work, I've already started showing some on there in relation to the dingo I'm working on. Also working on a little cute set of teddy bears. And shortly, I hope to start on a purple winter fairy. And that one's going to take some time because it is a much smaller scale. The cloth is much smaller together. The holes are much closer together. I have seen a few cross-stitching patterns being worked on YouTube. I just like the idea of working on something with a slightly bigger holes to work with, slightly bigger squares to work with. Because higher count, more chance of being able to see progress happening. A bit like this. We've been able to complete something like this in a little under an hour. Still need to go a little bit higher, but that's a cutesy little nest so far. And so bearing in mind, giving it the double up on the walls, you get some good, sturdy, dense portion here, but that is still quite low, quite shallow. So we want to get a fair bit more than that done. But we are getting close, I think. So hopefully before the end of this stream, we'll be able to jump onto one of the other colours. Just need to decide on the colour. At least the difficulty in making choice in colour is pretty much straightforward. I've got 3 colours on the table. I've got a lot more colours behind me, but behind me is just an absolute mess. So we won't move the camera around there. So what do you think? If we're going to make another nest about the same size as this one, maybe slightly bigger, what colour would you like to be seen done? Orange, red or grey? I'm doing good with the amount of thread which is here, the amount of yarn available, which is good. It's a worry when you have the little 50-gram balls of yarn, how far they're going to go. I have to see about making myself a couple of like toy pygmy possums. And is there such a thing as a pygmy possum? Baby possum of some kind that can snuggle down in one of these until I have enough to be able to send off to the Ark. But it's doing the thinner ones like this, especially once I get only a little bit of this yarn left. I can mix up the colors, because if it's just being done simply like something like this, it's not so much of an issue with regards to the change in colors, because I do hope that any wildlife that ends up in one of these nests is not going to be too judgmental of me of my changing of colors. And currently, whilst I've been doing crochet or cross stitching, or even some of my paint by numbers, my go-to audio is actually a D&D campaign. Actually, to be honest, it's 2 D&D campaigns. So depends on, once I get a little too anxious as to a fight on one, I have to jump over to the other and just listen to their antics. And now my go-to place is Critical Role. Currently doing a mixture of jumping between Campaign 1, Vox Machina, and Campaign 2, The Mighty Nine. And so some people may be aware of that being on the, now, is it the Netflix show? Can't remember if they're on Netflix or one of the other ones. But it's the animated series, loosely based on the actual show itself. I haven't myself been able to get into the animated series. I think maybe because I like the madness involved on the original group of people sitting around a table being absolute buffoons, which is just what you need, compared to the more gritty, I suppose you could say, animated show. And I guess the good thing is that if you're listening to something, and I mean like one episode of Critical Role can be 3 or 4 hours. So it's not a short amount of time. But then again, when I'm crocheting, I don't usually crochet only for half an hour at a time. If I'm cross stitching, I'm most definitely not doing half an hour at a time. So it's having something that is long lasting without being too busy, I suppose. We're looking good in relation to the height at the moment. So if you see, fold it down, we're almost at the, as far as the diameter is. So a few more rows for that. But I think for this one, I want a bit more height to it. They are still looking quite shallow. And this isn't quite shallow without even thinking of it being folded over. So a few more rows to go at least. I do need to see about doing some bigger teddy bears as well. I was once shown, I was once given the pattern for trauma teddy bears. And so they're not crochet, they are knitted. And the trauma teddies, based on a particular pattern required, are the teddy bears that, once completed, are given to the emergency services around Australia. So police and ambulance and fire brigade, places like that. And in the event of dealing with someone who's had a traumatic situation, I mean, you think if a child has just been in the middle of a car crash or something like that, is absolutely distraught, they get given a teddy bear. And it's just something comforting that they can have in the midst of a bad time. And so for a while, I was making those as well. I think I ended up in having to call an ambulance over for myself at one point. I didn't need to go to hospital that day, thankfully. However, I was able to give the ambulance, the EMTs, about 5 teddy bears, which they were able to take with them. And it meant that at least their ambo, that was topped up with a few teddy bears ready for the next people who might need them. What I think was quite cute as well is that they said it's not only children that get them, but adults and elderly people as well. It's just whoever needs a little bit of comfort in a bad situation, they get to have a little snuggle. Now, I do sometimes stream on Twitch as well, if anyone's on Twitch. I go under the pseudonym Esmina Cross Stitch. I do cross stitching as well as crocheting on there. So you're always welcome to come and find me on Twitch as well. That's Esmina, ESMINA, X Stitch. You'll find me more often on YouTube, but there's a few different places depending on what takes your fancy. Let's have a look where we're up to so far. That nice little pouch, if nothing else. Okay. So we can keep it tall like this, which is a good depth. And then let's see about bringing it down a bit. That's not bad. That's a good depth for something this size. That's a good depth. And so that's almost doubling the walls, which is giving it, this is the thing, you're giving it a good push down. It's holding up quite nicely. So stick a couple of baby Builderbees in there. That baby animals. That should work out quite nicely. So let's finish off this row. And the good thing is when you're doing something like this, especially with such small stitches, you can finish off at any point you want. It's not something, there's not the hard and fast rule to finish a particular row or a particular loop around. Now, having a look at the timing. we'll get this one completed, and then we'll keep one of the other nests for another stream session later on. I suppose making the joy of doing these as well. I want to see that you can check out one particular project at a time. I don't want to be halfway through one of these and then have to leave you to it. So let's complete one project at a time. Project. Depends on which way you want to say that word. I've been in this country 20 years and I still do it halfway between the one or the other. Okay. Okay. And now, what have I done with my needles? A slightly thicker needle than one I use for sewing, that's for sure. Oops. There we go. There we go. We've got ourselves a nice little nest made up. Little under an hour and a half to make this one up. Cute little thing. So there, when it goes to a carer, they usually put 1 or 2 tissues inside, put the babies in there. You have the tissues to be able to make sure that if there's any animal waste, goes on the tissues, gets chucked out, fresh ones go in, and then the nest lasts more than, a couple of days. And so hopefully that will be nice and simple for someone to look after. Just unfolds, pop it through the wash, pop it through the dryer if you must, fold it back down, new baby's inside. There we go. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming and visiting me and following me through this little nest making. We'll make some more in the future as well. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.